Welcome, welcome, welcome to Charting Your Course. I want to thank a tremendous amount to the radio show before house, the Lighthouse, for reading the Divine Masculine Revocation. I am Andrew Bartzis. I am joined today by my infamous co-host, Kathy Ma. Debbie Smart is out on location charting her course to find a crystal skull. She will be back next week. Kathy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andrew. It's great to be here. Very exciting to be in this new show we've got, Charting Your Course. Just the things that we're going to be talking about today and in the upcoming weeks are just very, very exciting.
Exactly. And what we are going to be talking today is about the big bad world of dating and being a spiritual person, a non spiritual person, awake, unawake, and everything in between, fat, thin, and everything else that we haven't even talked about yet. What a good and healthy relationship looks like, what a bad and unhealthy one. Ways to get into relations, ways to get out. This show is going to be one of those seminal shows that anyone new to the awakening field can look back to so they can chart their course into a relationship, out of a relationship, or into a state of neutrality so they can find themselves again.
Mm. I mean, even just thinking about all that, it's just such a big topic and it's overwhelming. It really is very daunting, especially for those of us that are really not sure about what we're doing, and especially if we're single and wondering what's coming up next. How can we create it? How can we not repeat cycles that we've been doing, even just to recognize them? It's such a challenge.
Exactly. So one of the first things that I want to bring up is, this the point of charting your course is for those people that are new to spiritual awakening, discovering there's all this different fear porn out there, but they still have relationships and they still have to maintain them. And one of the things we on a regular reading show, we find people that are in almost loveless relationships where they have separated two sides. They don't sleep in the same beds or whatever has gone on. One has gone in one direction and the other into another.
Yes, yes. And being able to even recognize that that's happened, because sometimes you just wake up and it's there and you think, how did I get here? And wait, is this what I wanted? Did I ask for this? Or, even looking within yourself and thinking, how did I contribute to getting to this point?
Exactly. What did I do? 15 years into a relationship where you felt the trueness of the love in the beginning, and 13 years later the trueness is gone, and the authentic, harsh reality of two people have grown apart.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And being able to recognize it is really difficult. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, and to also be able to step back, look at it, and see what contributing factors were involved from your part, and to take ownership of things you did or didn't do is extremely difficult, because usually by that point you're so entrenched in it that you're thinking it's all them.
So exactly. So what does taking true ownership of your part look like? So many people don't get that.
Yeah, yeah. It, I think it comes to a point where basically you have to have the ability to sit back and, you know, ground yourself very clearly and be able to look at everything, but try not to put the emotion in it, take the emotion out of it, and to see, okay, this is the status of what's going on right now. And let's use the example you brought up of just maybe living in separate rooms. Possibly it started off, and I'm just, spitballing here. It's not necessarily meant for anyone in particular, but maybe it started off that one of them is snoring and the other one can't sleep. So the simplest solution at the time was to sleep in separate bedrooms, because that way both parties can get a sound sleep. But as the years go by, one thing that you have to look back and see within that sort of frame of what's happened is, okay, so your solution was to separate into sleeping in separate rooms because of the noise issue. But during these upcoming years, or the years following it, did you explore other avenues on how to help the snorer, to adjust so the snoring was decreased? I mean, obviously, the ideal scenario is to not have the snoring, but what methods did you employ, both of you employ, over, let's say, the next 5 years to assist that issue and try and get back united in the one bed for later? And very often, one of the things that I see is that there was no steps made, because it was like, wow, such a relief, I'm sleeping, and then issue out of your head. And as opposed to dealing with it and facing it, because it is a difficult issue, and one that not necessarily always has a simple answer, it was easier just to separate into a separate room to have supposedly good sleep and not realize that on the physical side and the touch feel side, you've missed out and that you're growing apart more physically, just bit by bit every day, chipping away. But because it's bit by bit, chipping away every day, you don't notice it. And then often I see a lot of people justify it to themselves with, well, you know what, we still have an active sex life. Like we just do it before or after and then go to our separate rooms. But one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand, it's not so much the actual, just the physical, it's the intimacy that is before and after, or even the intimacy of during the night when you have a nightmare and you wake up and you're alone and you're scared and you don't have your beloved next to you. And it's all those little things that start to chip away at a person and at that relationship over time that add up. And then suddenly you're thinking, who are they?
Exactly. Who are they? And another common example is when they're as they're growing apart, they dump more of the codependency onto one side. As an example, with the snoring, if you aren't helping and assisting, you are putting that person at a disadvantage because they're the snorer. Or whatever it is that they do, if they're not well or good doing at something and you're not assisting them in the relationship, you aren't a part of that relationship. Oftentimes people's stuff that they have to tackle are the hardest things for them, and they need the emotional support of their beloved person that they're sharing their space with.
Yes, I totally agree with you there because I mean, one of the side effects that comes out of these types of scenarios is if you are the snorer, you feel like you've done something wrong, you know, and that self-esteem is going down. Like, wow, they've like gone to another room.
Exactly, they've
And
gone to another room.
what did I do? I mean, you weren't even doing it on purpose. And you know that's quite a big blow to a person's ego within a relationship. And then there's nothing you can do necessarily on your own to convince them to come back because it's like a decision that's made and you can't control it. Therefore, this is where it is. And
Right.
that's really not the way that you came together as a couple to start with.
Right. That makes a cognitive disconnection of if if you were having sexual relations that time, a cognitive disconnecting of that energy, which can be harmful, especially when a person's fresh and awakening and trying to get their kundalini and their spirit to flow, and all of a sudden the being that they connected with in those acts all of a sudden isn't there, isn't in the frequency. They're off doing their own thing.
Yes,
That normally does happen, but you should share, some time afterwards before you jump up, put the clothes on, and go somewhere else.
yes, yes.
And too often in the snoring scenario, that happens and the other leaves, which can
Mm,
cause trauma. But
mm.
the person experiencing the snoring also is getting their trauma.
Yes, yes, and it's a very difficult one because I mean, you know, we mentioned snoring as one example. Another one that I come across a lot, which I'm sure you do as well with your clients, Andrew, is that one of them will say, you know, but I'm very spiritually evolved now that they've got bad energy, they won't cleanse it. I don't want to sleep next to them because
Yep.
of all this bad, you know, heebie-jeebie whatever stuff that they think they're emitting.
Hmm.
And that's another big one because without even realizing it, they're pointing the finger at someone else. And I get it. Yes, if they are not spiritually cleansed and they are holding dirty energy, it is an issue which you both need that the couple needs to address and try and work something out. But to just leave and leave them on their own in their so-called dirty energy is also something that which indicates to me that there's something core which is not right with the relationship
Yep.
because to love someone that much and want to share your life with them, but to again abandon them to their bad energy, and they might not even be aware of that, just your perceived belief about their bad energy, that's to protect yourself. You know, there are other things that you can do rather than just do that.
Exactly. So when it comes to that, let's use this bad energy or negative energy or traumas unhealed. Let's call it that.
Mm,
Most often, when people grow apart and one is more spiritual than the other, it was destined that way from the beginning. Okay.
Mm.
You chose a person who wasn't going to have a high volume of spirituality while you were trying to grow yours. If you saw them not growing as you were growing, those are a set of choices you made in the past that now directly affect your present because that person still isn't growing. And when they're not growing, they're not healing, it does affect the other individual's path and journey. This is why I say it's our individual journey. And this is where so many people screw up on the most fundamentals. They become couples and they think their spiritual journey is shared and bonded. It is only shared and bonded when they're sharing a bed and sharing a dream space. And there can be a common set of ethics that can be created to make sure that that is separate. So when you're on your spiritual journey, the love is still there as the basis and foundation for creation, but the journey into the spiritual self is an unentangled individual process. And when the other is ready to raise their frequency, you will be able to assist them through what you have learned, but don't take them on as projects. And this is the other thing where we see people taking on unhealed people as projects. Almost always in any relationship, if it's years old and I discover this, they took them on as a project and settled for something that they didn't really want.
Yes, yes. You've brought up a very, very interesting point. Well, I guess highlighted a very interesting point in that you're not necessarily always going to be on the same path, spiritual journey or exploration, but it doesn't mean that they can't ride along. And they don't even have to understand everything. They don't even have to have the same vocabulary as you.
Right.
The fact that you're still together means that there's a certain amount of acceptance, maybe not understanding or comprehension, but there's an acceptance and a need, no, not a need, a want to stay along for the ride. But because they can't understand you or your frame of reference or your vocabulary is not a reason to exclude them. They don't have to understand everything to be in the back seat.
Exactly. As long as they're love based and heart based, it doesn't matter what scale that you guys are separated off, as one is a near oracle and the other is just a plebeian. It doesn't matter. When they are love based and they're truly exchanging love portals between their heart chakra centers, they are not doing you harm and you are not doing them harm. When you are going on your individual journey, you are allowing their love to be a background part of your footstep to footstep process into the ever moment now. Because they're your
Mm,
support, they're your love. When we deny them that ability on our spiritual journey, we are also stepping on their journey. As different as it is to ours, their journey has shorter steps because they are prepared with a different set of life contracts.
mm. That's so true. And also, by excluding them, you're not allowing them to blossom. I mean, just
Exactly.
because they don't blossom at the same speed and volume that you blossom doesn't mean they're not learning.
So
Even
here is
hearing it, isn't it? Sorry, go on.
yeah. So even hearing it, the stories that go on when you go on your spiritual journeys, it is inspiring to them on their own way. And yes, at some level, they are living vicariously through you, but they do that through love. As long as that love doesn't turn perverted and obsessive, meaning they have to know every little detail of this and that because they aren't doing their own journey, that's different.
Mm,
So many situations that both you and I run into, one is in a one of the five major religions and the other is going into their own spirituality, and that their dogmas clash.
mm. Yes, that is a big issue. Because there sometimes there is just what is how can I put it? It's no matter how much you may explain where your position is, the other one is unyielding in theirs. But it's okay to agree to disagree. It doesn't mean that you can't coexist. It just means that there are certain things that you both are not going to agree upon. Um, especially when it comes to things like religion. Some people just have very strict views of what it is and what they believe in, and they might be like that their whole lives. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. If that suits them and that's their choice, and they are okay with it, then so be it. Um, no matter how much you try and convince them that what they believe is wrong, it would be a waste of time. And also, dishonoring their own belief system, whether you agree with it or not. So when you turn it around and you think that they're judging you, you have to think about what have you been saying to them about their belief system, because often things that you are most critical about, you're guilty of yourself.
Exactly. You two are each other's reflections and what needs to be learned. In that example of one in the five major religions, when you are growing into your awakening, you often realize that religions are a trap, but they are not a permanent trap. And oftentimes, religions cannot exist without the light and the dark to create evolution. That's the reason they were created in an ancient time and still survive to now. So we can make a new way that does not step on the journey of others, but still allows the love creation and co creation through, but takes the look at what is in polarity and what is in positive or negative charge to some action or reaction. When we allow that into ourselves, we can see where our subtle judgments are on a person who is believing in one of the five major religions and put their faith into it over many dozens of years, and how you subtly judge it because you are growing into a new expression, a higher density of self.
Yeah, I mean it's a really, in many ways it's a very good self-challenge to be facing these kind of things, because if nothing else, it teaches you about boundaries and respect, respect for another individual, their ideas, their concepts, and for that particular group in general, and expecting that same respect and boundaries for yourself as well, no matter what it is that you may choose to believe or pursue. I mean, even just to have a simple example, I can remember, talking about chakras to a boyfriend years and years ago, and he was very orthodox religious, and the concept for him was like I may as well have tried to pull his hair out. It was just not even woo woo. He was like, wow, this is not okay. But over the years, you start to understand what I'm talking about and can understand what it is, can see physical examples of um, what a chakra can do, like with the pendulum, etc. And even being able to see all that, he still would stick with his belief, but that was okay. But at least he gave me the respect to listen to me for several years and let me show him examples and not judge me too harshly. I mean, I'm not going to say there was no judgment at all,
Yes.
because I mean, but it's like water on a duck's back. You just got to let it go. It's if you've not been brought up with any of this and not have been exposed to any of this, even a chakra is a way off limit topic. Let alone talking about the galaxy.
Or awakening in general. Exactly.
Yeah, or a spiritual ceremony or a fire ceremony. I mean, So it's also being able to look at what you're doing and what you're talking about and understanding that it is a lot of different things to what another person may be used to. And you're not asking them to accept it as their truth, just to accept that it is yours and to respect you and honor what you're doing.
Exactly. So the next thing you said, respect and honor what they're doing and what you're doing. And this comes to the next level when the relationship has reached enough polarity that one person or the other is shutting the other person's creativity down by saying, no, you can't do that. You cannot burn sage in here. I don't believe in that. And that is called shutting down.
Yeah, that's a tough one. That really is a tough one because obviously, if you're on these kind of spiritual journeys, burning things like sage is important, and you want to do it as frequently as you feel the need to do it. It's a very difficult one. You have to get inventive, really, to find other ways to counter their objection without full on going for the sage.
And that's
And it
being creative.
exactly, it's like, well, okay, no means no, I guess. But, there are many ways to cut a deal, Just because the course A didn't work doesn't mean I haven't got XYZ and, OPP as well. I have many
Exactly.
routes. Yeah. And
So
it's
what
finding something that's acceptable to everyone.
Right. So one of the things that can say is, all right, you're going to watch TV all this day Sunday. If you want to watch TV all Sunday without me giving you a honey to-do list, let me sage this house.
Ah, that's a good one.
Ah, everyone knows that game right there.
A trade.
A trade, equal exchange.
Yeah,
You got your TV, I got my saging.
exactly. How much do you want to just sit in front of the telly?
Exactly.
But that's a very creative and smart technique, and one which, I'm sure the other person would hear.
Exactly.
But it is all about respect, honoring, and being creative to find a solution rather than just, go up and call up your friend and grump about it and say, he doesn't understand me, this and that. And I don't know if there's a future. It's like they're creative, find a
And
solution.
exactly. And that's falling back in depression. And that's the next thing I want to talk about when we do call up the friend and we are repeating the habit pattern. Oh, he doesn't understand me. He's not going to change, or she doesn't do any of this stuff, and I want to go out and do this, and she's only into that.
Mm, mm,
Relationships have been doing that for millions of years. It's
yeah.
not it's not the first time you've been in a relationship like that. And you can call upon your ancient memories to give you clarity, to help you understand that for whatever purpose you are in this relationship, and you cannot see the separation of your world and the separation of their world as the habit pattern. You have
Mm,
to see what led you there, what good things were there to keep you balanced enough to continue your journey. And if that comes into a point where you say, I can no longer keep that frequency in my life, you move on. But you have given every choice in the form of love between the two of you for him to create or her to co create with you. Even if it's one little tap of the drum or allowing the saging, you are getting their blessing
mm,
from their
yeah.
belief system, which is vital for so many people in relationships.
Mm. It is. And one of the things that you also have to remember in these type of relationships is that no two relationships are the same. Just because your friend has a very understanding partner and joins them on all their trips and journeys and lectures, etc., doesn't mean that that's what will happen for you.
Right.
It's very individual in that sense. So you have to find a way that works for you and your partner, not look at everyone else and judge and decide that that's what I want. You can't compare your relationship with someone else in terms of their partner's participation and then come back with that attitude that you expect your partner to do the same. Because for a start, there's no way you can know every single thing that goes on within a relationship. So this could be, that last stab at keeping it together. You have no idea, or whether or not they're really into it. What you have in your situation is something that you will create and you will co-create with your partner that works for both of you. And as long as you and your partner are happy with it and the status and the progress that you make, that's all that matters. You cannot let yourself judge it by other people's standards or what's happening with other people.
Hmm. And this leads into the next thing is some people are quite happy with their level of mental health and don't wish to be cured when in fact there's something major wrong with them. This is in the other level of relationships that both you and I in our private and radio show sessions get all the time.
Mm, yes.
And what to do. You've got two kids and bank accounts that are entwined, and this person, is regularly having nightmares or not dealing with their traumas, not healing themselves, verbally abusive, etc., etc., etc.
Yes. I mean, it's a tough one because you're so, as you say, entwined together. How do you put the brakes on and reevaluate and decide where you're going to go with this? Because if your partner just is not hearing you and will not do anything, you cannot sit by and just be a window shopper and just watch your life go by. Because what you do by just consenting to do nothing is the same as agreeing to stay in where you are and repeating this cycle. Again, we're coming back to this cycle. Do you want to break that cycle of what you're in? if it's not working for you. And if your partner is not listening to you and you've repeatedly tried many different ways and they still won't, and they're still spiraling down in many different kind of ways, at what point are you going to say enough is enough?
Right. 15 years, 9 years, 1 year. Patience in relationships is necessary, but patience and enabling are two separate things. When you patiently enable someone, or you're patiently waiting for them to heal themselves.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. The enabling,
The
that's, yeah.
enabling. We
Mm,
talked about that in our first show about what really enabling means. It means you are exchanging energy so that person can stay exactly where they are. They're really not trying. They're not truly honoring their own personal journey while you are trying to honor your personal journey, which affects you at the most basic co creation level. You're expecting, where's your mystical energy? I'm creating this mystical energy whenever I can. And as part of our equal co creation of relationship, we're supposed to have this mystical relation, whether it's through sexual relations or through that touch or the morning smile that puts happiness in your soul, so you can go to work all day and know that that smile's there waiting for you.
mm. Yes, I mean, that's powerful. All these little things are so powerful. But at the same time, if they're being withdrawn from you for whatever reasons, you have to consider why. It's not always just about their unwillingness, it's about your willingness to let the situation keep going because you have choices. Everyone has choices. Every day you wake up, you live the same life that you're leading, you let people do the same things to you that have been annoying you. That's a choice.
Yes.
You can wake up and you can choose to not choose that particular path but a different one. It doesn't have to be super life changing defining moment, but you can choose, instead of standing there and being berated, you can walk off.
Right.
And if there's a phone call and there's abuse, you can hang up. You can make little choices every day that make are going to make a big difference to your big picture. If you are putting up with things that you consider negative to you or non-respectful or non-honoring of you as a human being, for you or your family, then you have to think about what are you going to do about it. And I don't necessarily mean, oh, that's it, I'm packing my bags and going,
Right.
because
Because that's
that's not always a
impulse,
solution.
and that's impulsive.
Yes. And there's a certain amount of really, have you tried everything before you get to that point? Um, but it's more about what choices are you making every day, all the time, that keep perpetuating your unhappiness in that particular thing. And until you've exhausted a lot of different choices that you keep making, you can't make big choices until you've made little ones, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly. Found your little victories that keep the relationship alive and well, even if it is the meal that makes them more happy than you. Okay. Because you still have to co-create there, because when you completely stop co-creating, it's already over.
I mean, that
whether
brings up, sorry.
whether it's over because you have an impulse that it's over, because so many people are like, I'm done, I'm walking away, I'm done, and that stays in their field, but they do nothing. That is a form of spiritual attack.
Mm,
Believe it or not, your energies are that entwined. When you're using that, I'm done, I'm walking away, and you're having those mental arguments inside and out loud because that you're practicing what you're going to say to them next, that's vengeance.
mm. I mean, it's the common mistake is to not honor yourself as a unique and sovereign being,
Right.
deserving of being treated as a fabulous entity.
Who has spiritual gifts that need to be recognized, and you're looking for those people that recognize authentically who you are each day you're alive.
Mm, yeah, that's so true.
Okay. We all need that confirmation. Love provides us one level of confirmation, but when those beings we love interact with us and create synchronicities of mass confirmation, we know that the divine source is working with that love.
Mm. You brought up an interesting point just before, which diverges a little bit, but I'd like to address it because I'm sure that a lot of people have this issue because I've come across a lot. is that when you talked about the meals, like I get quite a few clients, so I'm sure you're the same too,
Hmm.
where one of them has turned vegetarian or vegan.
Yep.
And it's just not happened overnight, but it happened fast. And they're both, serious meat eaters to begin with. So it's a huge change.
Hmm.
Um, and so the one that has become vegetarian or vegan has usually very, what is the word, strict views on what is allowed to be cooked in the kitchen.
Exactly.
uh, how does one cope with that if you're the meat eater?
You cook yourself. That's the first part, because what you're asking the other person to do who has made a choice in their own life is to cook two meals simultaneously.
Mm,
Okay?
mm,
That's what you've asked them to do. They're not just preparing for one person, they're preparing for two people, two separate meals. Assist them. Okay?
mm,
And maybe try their perception a little bit. At least give it face time. Okay,
mm,
I'll try your vegan casserole. It might taste good. Okay? Especially when there's love in it and the
mm.
co-creation within it. That's the first level. The next level, well, if you're going to continue to be the meat eater and you continue to do that process, and whatever the polarity is, you have to respect what they're doing and be able to pick up the excess layers. All right, so they're going to choose that. Maybe I'm going to do something that assists both of us and shows my love back, even if it's, making the meals or learning how to cook their stuff even though you don't eat it.
Mm.
Okay? That goes a long way to showing respect for their choices. We can agree to disagree, and I can still respect you. So many people forget that other part of we can agree to disagree in respect.
Yes, you're so right. And especially one of the things that I always tell people is don't forget you have ketchup.
Yeah, don't forget you have ketchup.
Oh, that tastes so well. So, well, you got ketchup, you got soy sauce.
You got all sorts of things.
But one of the things that I have encountered actually more frequently these days is uh, two parents, they're vegetarians or vegans, bringing up kids to eat the same. And then the kids, are teenagers discovering hamburgers, roast duck, things like this. And the judgment that the parents are putting on the kids for, trying stuff out and liking it.
Judgment becomes control.
Yeah. And that's becoming a bigger issue than I had ever encountered before. And whether that's because there's more vegetarians out there now than there used to be, or I'm just seeing them more, or people are being more open about it, I'm not sure. But certainly there's a whole huge range of adolescents that are now having a big quandary and feeling a lot of pressure not to eat meat or fish, etc., because their parents don't. They're not being
Correct.
allowed to choose for themselves.
Right. And that is an example of our ancestors passing on habit patterns in force to
Mm,
others, allowing them to discover their own, not allowing them to discover their own journey. Yes, parents have a certain set of rights and spiritual rights to impress upon their children, but they still must impress and allow them to make their own trials and errors.
mm,
If you truly taught them who they were, them experimenting should have no threat to your parenting.
mm. That's true. That's true. And a lot of it is about heritage, right? What
Yeah,
is coming down through the generations. I mean, if you're coming down to a generation of, massive meat eaters, or even farmers, fishermen, it's very difficult to jump to just vegetarian food because
it,
you're not genetically to start with in your terms of your DNA and your cultural geared towards that.
right, exactly. In my Greek culture, I remember my brothers or myself bringing home girlfriends who were vegetarian or vegan, and oh, you can eat this. It's grass-fed lamb. That's how ignorant the society was to veganism. And that happened in truth more than once. Okay.
I know what you mean. People's perception is very strange. Oh, I ate grass.
It's grass fed, exactly.
as opposed to eating steaks.
Exactly, as opposed to eating steaks that are grass fed too. But, it's lamb, it's not meat to them.
Yeah, I've actually heard that before too. You just can't stop laughing when you hear it, and the mystified look you get is like, what? But they're just so convinced that's true.
All right, Kathy, the next thing I want to talk about is intimacy and personal intimacy with oneself. Oftentimes, people who are in no relationship have no personal intimacy with themselves. And then when they get into a relationship, they're intimate with their other friend, with their person for a while, and then they go back into that non-intimacy stage
Mm,
where they've lost their touch to get to their spice of life, and they are using the energy of their mate to stay afloat.
mm. Yes, I do encounter that a lot too. And, a typical example of modern day time to just highlight this so people can relate to it a lot is I have a lot of clients that, when they dated and married, everything was wonderful, love, passion, physical, libido, everything is going well. And then with like 2 years, usually it's around the 2 year period, people fall back into their norm routine that they had before as an individual and when they were single, because, you always fall back to what is familiar, I suppose you could put it. And one of them inevitably used to play, not video games, you call it computer games. And a lot of these games that they go all night because you join people for some quest in the middle of the night and you're there for 6 hours. So not only does your partner not have that time with you anymore, but also the bedtime, the sleeping time is lost to them because they're playing these games, and which they completely believe is necessary and they can't live without. And these people have been waiting for ages for them to join back because they've, down a soldier or whatever it is. And in a sense, you can completely see where they're coming from because if that is your world, then that makes sense. But as a partner who doesn't play these games and hasn't known you to have this kind of everyday behavior, it's suddenly very alienating. And what do? You've not only lost their attention on a day-to-day basis, but you've lost that intimacy with them at night because generally they'll play these games at night. So on a sexual level as well, you're left hanging because they might say, okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. So you're putting on your sexy negligee, you're waiting there, you got candles, and 5 hours later you're asleep, candles nearly catch fire to the curtains. And how does one deal with that?
Right.
Because no matter how you explain it to your partner, they don't get it because they'll always fall back on, but I used to do this before. But what they've forgotten is, but not when I dated you and married you, because I've held this habit in check.
Exactly. And using that expression, the next level is when somebody's trying to give the subtle hint and it's not heard.
Oh,
This
yes.
is the dangerous grounds of expectation.
Mm, yes.
Okay? Because, after the habit pattern's been created and you know that they're going to do that, you are defeating yourself by, getting the sexy negligee and doing all that stuff prepared, knowing full well inside they're going to play that game for 6 hours.
Yes. But the subtle hint dropping and, oh, yes, yes, I'll be there soon, you interpret as being 15 minutes.
And thus you find yourself in trauma.
Yeah.
And this is what we really have to discuss is healing the traumas of expectation.
Mm,
It starts with forgiveness, self-healing, and self-love. That person is playing that video game because they need the self-healing and love that comes from playing of that video game.
mm,
Okay?
yes.
Am I saying go and play the video game with them? No, that usually will create more issues. Not always. But you have to be able to entertain yourself intimately and connect to your own authentic self and say, yes, he can be off doing that or she can be off doing what they're doing. And I know eventually they'll come and share their time with me because this is where they're choosing to lay their head. This is where they're choosing to say, I trust you.
Mm,
Okay. To create enough love space to co create together, no matter what level it's on.
mm. Yes, certainly. I mean, it's almost like you're reclaiming your projections that you're putting on someone,
Yes.
and maybe not knowingly. And in a way, fair enough, you didn't know this behavior existed before, but in a sense, it doesn't matter. It's what you're expecting them to be, what role you're expecting them to play, what attention you're expecting. And the truth is, people are not mind readers. Even Aunt Andrew are not mind readers. I mean, it'd be wonderful. Well, actually, I don't think it'd be wonderful, but subtle hints don't help. You have to be honest. Stop playing I feel like abandoned. And,
exactly.
at least stop playing tonight and just let me have this moment. And then at least I know tomorrow you're going to be doing that. I can manage my expectations, reevaluate how I'm viewing it, and I will choose a book to read instead. It's that communication, open communication, and readapting your concept of who they are and formulating a new way to approach it.
Exactly. As well as taking over with an agenda that doesn't necessarily walk on their journey. So if their journey is the video games or whatever form of distraction it is, 2 weeks ahead of time, you can say, hey, we're going to go here for dinner or lunch. We're going to go do this. And make sure that twice, three, four times a month, you're getting your expectations met by their full attention.
Yes, yes, yes. And plenty of notice to tell the platoon that they won't be there.
Exactly.
They can
Okay.
go and fight the battle without you.
So the next thing in relationships is oftentimes we find people in the awakening process who have become hermits and are completely disconnected from the relationship system.
Mm, yeah. And that is actually a big challenge, bigger than one would think. I mean, you'd think that something like that actually is low down on the list, but actually it's pretty high up because that kind of personality and behavior is very difficult to break into because those people tend to be very happy in their own heads, and you don't even know that in their mind is gone when you're talking to them or you're sitting with them because they're just nodding. So you
Yeah.
think they're listening, but in fact their mind is way off wherever, analyzing something that happened at work or thinking I don't want to listen to this, blah 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 blah. And then you suddenly think, wait, did he hear me the last 3 days? Or was she, how come she doesn't understand what I'm talking about? I just asked her a simple yes or no question. Why is she nodding?
Mhm.
And at that point, you realize when people are checking out mentally like that, it's not that they find you boring, it's that they don't have the ability to focus. And they're so used to being on their own in terms of communication and space that they just automatically do it. They're probably not even aware that they're doing it. And if you said to them, well, why can't you recall what I said the last hour? They would just go, oh, I did. I just have a bad memory. They really can't conceptualize what they do.
Right. And if they do conceptualize it, they know that it's a habit pattern that's keeping them non-social. That's
Yes.
that hermetism, that habit pattern that says, no, I'm choosing to be not social because XX or X about the energy, about this, whatever it is keeping you non social. That is a negative habit pattern that has non beneficial qualities to it. And when you are in a relationship like with someone who's turned into has hermit qualities to them, it can be very difficult for the other person or for the person that's trying to pull someone out. You have an intense love for them, but they're a hermit and they don't want to go anywhere or do anything. They don't want to leave their house other than to go and get groceries or fill up on gas. That's it. That's all they want to do.
Yeah, that is actually an extremely good example because generally, when you're in the wooing stage, in the dating stage, they've stepped well beyond their boundaries. So you may not even have realized it at
Right.
the time because they want that, they arrange to meet you, you do things as a couple. So by the time you've understood that they have this type of personality or this habit, I'm not going to, I don't mean it like it's too late, but it's something that you have to really stop and take very seriously and think about the baby steps you're going to need to take.
Yeah, the baby steps for yourself so you don't fall into their habit pattern and be controlled by that pattern.
Mm, yes.
If
And
you're a person that wants to go out every Friday night, even if it's just to a movie and a dinner, it doesn't matter about the drinking or any of that other stuff. and the other doesn't want to do it, you continue to go out that Friday night and you leave them home. You should have other friends.
Yes.
Okay? If they want to stay home, or if they finally get enough, oomph in them and say, all right, this Friday I'll go out with you, even if it's one Friday every 2 months, that they're made an attempt.
Mm.
Okay?
But keep asking.
Keep asking. It's it.
Mm.
Say, Friday night is the way I grew up. It's in my culture to go out. Let's make our regular Friday night, 7 o'clock, a cool dinner place, something we both like, and make it a habit. Okay?
Mm.
And then you will be surprised how the hermits allow that into their habit pattern once they get authentic exchange back again.
Yes. Yes. You're so right. And
Because hermits yearn for it. Believe it or
yes,
not, they do.
you need patience with them. That's what it is. Patience and keep asking.
Mhm. Keep asking. So we have hermits, we have relationships that are out of balance. We've talked about a large variety of dating expressions. Now I want to go more into more of the marriage for those that are about to become married, the things to look for, the habit patterns to see. And we've described some of them before, but if you've never lived with the person, you should live with them before you marry them. That's a classic example with time aged wisdom behind it.
Yeah. I tell you, sometimes you have to look at that one as a bit of a double edged sword because, I mean, for me, the words in my head that I've been brought up with are why buy the cow and get the milk for free?
I like
Right?
that.
And that's always going to be a difficult one because you can never answer that question completely when you do a little trial or you're trying to see if you exist together well. But at the same time, if you don't do it and something comes up, you almost have to kick yourself for not having explored that before. So how does one overcome, that old traditional thinking versus practicality and wise? So I think it's often very, very important that you do set up your own boundaries and time boundaries. Like you can always, if you're not comfortable with it, you can always say, well, you know what, we're going to do this trial for 3 months, and then we're going to just make a decision. You have to put a clock on it for some people because it's just too much to accept just to fall into any other way.
Exactly. So when it comes to this marriage process, obviously there was some form of love that is expressed. In this bit of advice, or for those that are engaged, who have already experienced love, already understand that there are habit patterns that will need to be dealt with, and a way for you to create a more spiritually bonded relationship, and that is called doing personal relationship ceremonies. Now there are relationship therapists that use very similar concept to this. This is where you create an actual ceremony, whether it's a tea ceremony, a dinner ceremony, a post sexual ritual ceremony, where you share your experiences with each other and you get to the authentic self without pulling out the crowbar.
Yeah, the crowbar. I love that. But you put it so well. You've hit the nail on the head. Because it's not easy. It's not
Right.
easy. And it is hard. It is like prying somehow.
As I said, the crowbar. Too many times in my private sessions, I have done the query and discovered the majority of most relationship issues come when one or the other pulls the crowbar out during intimate moments and not letting it organically happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like dirty play
Yes,
because
it's
you're,
it's
you're
a
catching someone when they're so vulnerable.
exactly. Now, this is many thousands of generations old. As long as men and women have been having intimate relationships, this habit pattern has been replayed. Sometimes it works. You get them to open up, and other times it creates mass negativity. And too often in today's relationships, because there are so many expectations, that when you pull out the crowbar, you expect them to open up. You expect yourself to be entitled to their information because you love them so much.
Mm. Well, I think also one of the things that people don't realize is once you've done that, you've violated that privacy and that intimacy space. And from that moment onwards, your intimate moments are never going to be the same because there's wariness that comes in.
Exactly. And then you have, those people that have the quick slam bam, thank you, quick sexual relations with no intimacy afterwards, where
Yeah.
there's no romance a part of it. That is just an exchange of energy that is can be very positive a handful of times, but it turns out to be a very negative habit pattern when it's just that.
Mm, that is very true. And one of the things also that people find very difficult is recognizing that.
That's right.
And I'm guilty of the same thing.
We
It's happened
all are.
before to me, and you're like, oh, was that me?
Exactly. Ooh, was that me? I didn't mean to do that. All right. I know that I need to fix that space. So if you know you're a person that's constantly wielding the crowbar, learn how to put it away. Learn how to not ask that question, to be quiet enough just so that the minds can exchange energy. Because you can ask the question in the mind and not disturb the person and not even get an answer, but put it into the field of representation so that they can come to some resolution to it.
I think the resolution is something that once you get there, the relief as well that you'll feel is amazing. And
Yes.
I think people often discount that because it's easier just to, be the ostrich and put your head in the sand and pretend it's not happening and, not deal with it. But once you have the resolution, even if it didn't go the way you wanted, the outcome is still better than what you had before, which was
Exactly.
not happiness with the situation.
So the next level of the conversation here is the crowbar is put away, but the person still isn't talking.
Yeah. Yes, then you have to get at the spiritual flyers.
Then you need to do a little bit more understanding. And
Yes.
this is where intimate relationships can open up those words. You can say trade X for X. Lovers have been doing that since the dawn of lovemaking. Okay? That allows more openness. Yes, it's in a controlled scenario that has intense emotional releases at the end that might give them just enough courage to talk about their trauma and to come to some form of remedy or resolve or resolution with it.
Mm. And one very good technique that can be employed is going at from tackling this issue from a completely different way is trying to approach it like discovering how you might be unknowingly contributing to these undesirable aspects of your love life. Because if you change that energy to the way that you've been asking to talk about it, it really changes their perception of what you're saying. They don't feel so threatened anymore. They're like, oh, so it's not me, it's how are you doing this to create this? And that actually helps people open up more and give you more feedback because you've put it in a way that you're saying, am I doing something that is creating this between us? So even if they just make something and said, oh yes, yes, it's the way you just, brush me off hand when I try and hold your hand in public. Even if you know in your heart that's not the reason, you can accept that as being a legitimate thing to then springboard into asking about something else.
Yep. And springboarding to asking about something else. There's a fine line what is crowbarring and what is springboarding. Okay? If you have that is our break. We'll be back. As long as you don't have expectations, you can springboard just fine. When you have expectations, you are creating it with a crowbar. All right, we'll be back just after the break.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on Charting Your Course with myself, Kathy Ma, and the amazing Andrew Bartzis. And normally with the wonderful Debbie Smart, although she's out on location today, but she'll be back next week. And remember, you can get a private session with Andrew or myself by contacting Tenoch at galactichistorian.com. That's TENOCH at galactichistorian.com. And we'll be able to get to the bottom of your issues and help you see a better way ahead. And for those of you who don't know, excuse me, Andrew is offering a free video series calling Living the Mystical Life Daily. He shows you some tools and gives you knowledge about how to have mystical experiences in your everyday life. So sign up for free at andrewbartzis.com. Just put your name and email when you get to the page and you'll receive the first video right away. Again, just get it at andrewbartzis.com and enter your name and email to receive the Living the Mystical Life Daily series. And also, just to let you know, my own website, which is Kathy's Pearls of Wisdom, has just gone live. That's Kathy with a K, and wisdom doesn't have an E in it because, just to let you know, because I did originally try it with an E, and all those years of school, and then that didn't really help me in spelling.
Potato, potato.
I know. And of course, Debbie's website has gone live not long ago, which is innerdimensionhypnotherapy.net. So if you want to check out Debbie and find out more about what she does, please go to her website and have a look. So let us continue with the big bad love subject.
Love. It has
Love,
such
relationships.
wide, yeah, it's such a wide-ranging stuff. In that first hour, Kathy, we touched on a lot of examples and samples that were to get people to trigger, does that me? Have I had a relationship? Is what Andrew and Kathy saying resonant to me? We brought up a lot of stuff. We're going to open up calls. If people do want to call in, they can call in at 956-217-0261. This will not be for personal readings. This is going to be about dating in general. This is not going to be about pyramids and cabal conspiracies. This is going to be about dating in general. So if you have dating in general questions, stuff that we've talked about for the last hour, please call in 951-217-0261.
Actually, it's 956.
956. I'm
that's,
sorry.
that's okay. Or you can Skype Laura Lee Solomon.
As I dubbed it again.
I know, it's Sunday. And you've been out there on location doing all this pre-event stuff. I mean, that must have been very exciting. I'm
Yes,
really looking forward to this event.
yes, I know. I spent some private time in Mount Shasta with some very dear friends, and now I have a new fuel to for this event. I'm assembling all of the tools and doing the rituals that are going to prepare the psychic network that's going to be inside Living the Mystical Life Daily event on September 2nd and 3rd. I'm sorry, the 3rd and the 4th. And we are going to have an amazing event where people are going to be learning how to read the Akashic records at the most basic format, what sacred neutrality is, and an understanding of the galactic history so we can understand the context in which to ask our own questions.
Mm, wow. It's just so awesome to be able to have that opportunity to even conceive that you can do it is very exciting stuff. I mean, obviously, one would need to go to your site and look at all the material that you've have out there already in preparation for things like this. Apart from being familiar with your material, is there anything else that people should do in preparation for this event?
Their own personal ceremonies. This is the time of the I am recognition of where you are in your journey, and understanding that coming to this event is the culmination of your own personal pilgrimage and to learn more about your journey, more about the spiritual talents inside, what it takes to be motivated and to stay motivated, what discipline versus being disciplined is in the past versus the present, and understanding that there are certain disciplines that you learn that can create limitations in the future self, where you must understand your boundaries you've created for your learning. And once you know your boundaries, and you know your limitations and you know your expectations, you can create a 0 point frequency that takes away limitations and expectations. That is known as the 0 point, as the fetus in your mother's womb. Much of the teachings will be about reconnecting your heart to that fetus that was in your mother's womb, hearing the dual heartbeat of earth, that of the mother at the same of the child, in reconnecting to those original organic expressions of natural human life. The mystical experience opens into a daily process, constantly unfolding with new mysteries and delights.
Mm. I like the zero frequency. That's good. That is very
That's
good. So that you can totally fully appreciate everything that's coming.
that's right. So you can be in that readiness, in that state of readiness for the perfection that is there that you created in your own environment via the mystical process of prayer, interaction, ceremony, co-creation, contract revocation, and invocation.
Mm. Wow. Oh, exciting stuff. I can feel
So back
goosebumps.
exactly back to the big bad dating game. That's the next thing. There are many people that are out there looking for the right mate, and we have, both you and I have some tools and techniques that can assist them in that manifestation process.
Mm, most definitely. I mean, one of the big things that I started to do myself in the late 80s was, I finally understood that I can create things, you create abundance in all things, and one of them, of course, is abundance in love. But then the quandary was, okay, you create it and you put it out there, but what is it exactly that you want? Because by that time I was starting to learn you have to be very careful what you ask for, because when you get it, you then realize that you should have been more specific.
Exactly.
you know, Abundance and love might mean you get 100 phone calls, but it's not really what you meant. 100 people wanting to date you is not the same as finding that everlasting love that you're looking for. So at that time, I started to think about it, and it's very similar to the concept of when you put up an image board. I started a list. I started a list of things that I wanted within a relationship or within a person that would be in a relationship with me. And the more I started to write and then experience life, the more I realized my list was not fine tuned enough. And by that, I mean, for example, I might have said, meet a guy who adores me and we have a positive future. I mean, my list was very simple at the beginning. Whereas then I would do things like I would meet a guy who was absolutely fabulous, but didn't live in the same country and was always away. So, I mean, for me, it was like, okay, I got what I wanted, but I should have said 80% of the time is in the same geographical location as me. you know,
Exactly.
and you only get that with experience, right? Of thinking, be careful what you try and create, because if you're not specific, you'll get what you ask for. It just might not be what you thought in your head. So I actually have brought out a list that I had and then have added to. So one of the things I thought I'd do is I would talk about some of the things that I put on my list so that everyone can understand the detail that you need to put in a list, and then also fuel it for yourself if you want to put these things in your list, or if you've got something to tell us, let us know what we haven't included in our list that you think we should include in our list. And by our, I mean everyone that's listening to this program, because I'm sure everyone has good points that uh, myself or any one individual couldn't think of everything. So just to start it off, when I was visualizing what I wanted and starting to write down the things that I wanted, I had put things like be kind to children. And then I got very specific, taller than me. Because, one of the things that I did attract was someone who was quite a bit shorter than me. And in my mind, I wanted someone taller. So I had to be specific, write down taller than me, older than me, because again, attracting people that were younger than me, which wasn't the issue, but the mental maturity wasn't the same. So again, fine tune things. Financially stable, loves to eat and cook, be tidy, and loves doing dishes. And then, you get more in depth, like accepting of who I am, and then choosing things that mean something to you, like loves family, is kind, generous, loving, and supportive of my family and will help me look after my parents. Because for me, that was a very big thing because this is the way my family has grown up and the way we've operated for generations. So having a partner that doesn't understand that and is not prepared to help me support my parents in their older age was a big issue for me, especially when you're dating people not of the same race or the same culture. They don't necessarily have that same belief system, and you can't force that on someone. I'm sure you had the same when you were growing up, also, right,
Oh,
Andrew?
exactly. The same thing. And to add to this type of things that you're saying, you can make that into a prayer to the universe that's saying, I am looking for the right and perfect mate who enjoys the co creation process of cooking, who has a heart of their own, that has continued on their journey and will continue their journey, but is willing to share their wisdom, knowledge, and love with me in moment to moment loving. I take this moment to give prayers to the angel guides for the one that I love and give an expression of my angel guides' love to them. You can use so many different poetic expressions in prayer that bring that angelic being into fruition in your 1 degree of separation. So you have the ability to notice the guided beings that are around you, to bring them into your heart, your soul, your frequency of love, to have relationships, companionships that last long into the ancient future when you're old and gray.
Yes, that's an excellent one. See, I wish I had have known you in the late 80s. I would have put that in my list.
I'd have been 7. Sorry, in the late 80s, I would have been 15.
Yeah, you still didn't know what you want then.
No, not that. Yeah.
But it's true. I mean, what you say is totally true. And this just shows you how you can expand on your list. Once you've got that list down and you're putting it out there, you can go through point by point and really expand so that when you are in that creative energy and you're trying to attract this kind of love and this kind of person into your energy and into your life, you really can get exactly what it is you're looking for. I mean, I even had things like that will be loyal to me and happily wants to be in an exclusive relationship with me. And I only added that in after a couple of relationships because I didn't even understand when I started this list that this would be an issue. Because in my mind, my expectation, my projection of what I wanted, I assumed I would have complete exclusiveness in a relationship. Yet I didn't actually get that in one of them. And I thought to myself later, I mean, of course, you think, oh, I'm so stupid, da da da. But then I thought, you know what? I didn't actually put that in my list. I didn't ask for that. So it's even the minute things like that you have to think about and put that energy out there that that is what you want. Because I mean, especially in today's society, you've got to start with the first question when you meet someone is, are you married? Are you living with someone? Are you in a current relationship? I mean, it sounds so brutal, but if you don't ask these questions, you're making assumptions that may not necessarily be correct.
And you force them in a scenario to be authentically true in the beginning or lie from the beginning.
Yes, that's
Okay.
so true.
When you are forcing a scenario to make sure that your journey isn't going to be walked over, that is when your personal bull hockey meter has to step forward and say, all right, are you really married? And you look at the ring fingers, there's shadow there.
I know. I know. And when you're in a bar at night, sometimes it's hard to see, you almost have to get your lighter out. Just
Exactly.
I mean,
You
it's
know,
sad that you have to do it, but you do.
right. When you're getting to know the person before, some people are afraid, what were your previous relationships like? They don't want to ask that question in the first couple dates.
Yeah, that's so true because you tend to think that that's being too nosy, too personal,
Or
etc. But
crowbar-y.
yeah, but at the same time, if you don't define that your boundaries at the beginning and then you let yourself become attached to someone and find out later, it's almost like you have to kick yourself in the foot because, you could have stopped all that at the beginning by some simple questions.
Exactly. Just some simple questions. So some of the simple questions that you can ask on the first dating is, so what was it like growing up for you? That's a common one.
Yeah.
What did you do? Did you have a spiritual life ever? If that's within your expression. I say this because a lot of our callers, a lot of our listeners are following their own spiritual path and looking for companions. If right away you see there is no spiritual light bulb in there, why are you wasting your time?
Yes. It doesn't matter how hot they look.
Or whatever it is that they do that might inspire something else. Let's say they're an artist and or like a street artist or something, and they don't their spirituality is into them. Their art's their life. Yes, their art's their own spirituality, and they may be a beautiful person, but are you they going to be able to grow into an expression of companionship and be able to share your experiences? If they don't want to know anything about your woo-woo stuff, why are you wasting your time with them?
Yeah, that's so true.
Get it out on the first date.
Yep.
So we have been joined by caller 561. Your name and where you're calling from?
My name's Patty. I'm calling from Florida.
Hi, Patty from Florida. How are you doing today? Do you have questions about what we've been talking about, the big bad dating game?
Well, I have really been enjoying the show so far, and I've called in before. I've called on your other show before, and I've also spoken to Kathy extensively. She probably remembers me, but I just couldn't resist. I had to I had to call in because I was really relating to the list that you guys were talking about, and I've done the list, and my experience with the list was that it almost felt like a list of demands, and so I rewrote my list to kind of be a list of the kinds of experiences that I wanted to share with a partner. And I thought that felt a little more comfortable for me. But I also, you were just talking about, previous relationships and getting the woo-woo stuff out on the first date. And
Yep.
I've certainly done that. Though my experience has been that, and I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm single and I'm kind of enjoying my single life, and I was a little concerned when you were talking about the hermit stuff because I thought, oh my goodness, I hope I'm not doing that. But,
Are they talking about me?
I know. And so I hope I think that what the process I'm going through is healthy, self-reflective, and so forth. Because my last few relationships have, I don't have any regrets, but they've been kind of complicated and, not. They were very challenging, complicated relationships, and I think that at some point I'd like to return to something more simple,
And
than what
that'll
I've
be your
had.
that'll be your challenge at creating new relationships. So that is an example of a trauma that you're taking from one previous experience into the next. And what you were
Yeah.
saying before about what you want to what experiences you want to share with a companion, that's wonderful. Those are
Yeah.
examples giving direct expressions to your spirit guides so that they can go out and find somebody that has a similar heart resonance to that.
Right. That's what I'm hoping.
So when it comes to healing the past, this is where you have to give yourself the present no form of expectation, but still an agenda that doesn't create expectations. You come up with a list of the top 5 questions to ask on the first date, and you can make it a joke to the person. You say, hey, my psychic told me to ask these 5 questions every time. And you might be able to turn it in such a way where humor can be to your advantage.
Yeah, I like that.
So, Kathy, what do you think the most important questions to ask on a first or second date is?
I think, apart from the one we discussed, are
Yeah, are
you
you
basically
married? Does you have
available
children?
in,
Exactly.
in terms of our own definition?
Those are the first. Those should be done before you're even on the date.
Yes. I really like the one about your growing up experiences because that really shows you a lot about a person. And if they're not even willing to talk about it, it already speaks volumes to you. And whether or not you think you can deal with someone who's a bit more complicated and introverted is, a very personal choice. But the fact that people won't talk about it is very, what is the word? Telling, I think. One of the questions I always used to use was also, what are you willing to do for your family? What lengths are you willing to go, in the what if scenarios? And, are you willing to house your parents till the rest of their life if that was to happen? What would you do if your daughter got pregnant? All these kind of, and they might not even have a kid, but it's just a game that you can play with people to see where their boundaries are and where, if their moral compass is the same as yours. I mean, sometimes you don't have to make it so serious,
As
it
well as
can
their
be,
as
sorry,
well
go
as
on.
their ability to respond to emotional questions, like what would you do if your 15-year-old daughter was pregnant, even if you don't have a kid. That
Yeah.
puts them into a situation where their own system has to respond.
Yes, yes. And it's also a kind of a safe area to go because it's a what if, it's like those games you played when you were in high school. What if this, what if that, what if
Exactly.
you suddenly discovered you had no underwear on and the breeze came up, I mean, it can be as simple as that. It's just seeing how people react to it and seeing if you find their response okay. Because often, people will stick to the mundane questions about what do you do? Do you like your boss? What
Yes, do
was,
you like your
yeah,
boss? No, I hate him.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
What was your last, boyfriend like? You're thinking, well, you know what? Well, I'm on my own now. So what do you think I think?
Right. The other question is, if you were an entrepreneur or an altruistic, person with money, what would you invest in? There are all sorts of other ways to see the type of soul that's in there, the creativity behind the person.
Yes. And one thing I'd like to ask you, Patty, is you said in your list you were putting down experiences you'd like to share with someone. Could you give us an example so that we can all have a good idea about what we might want to put on our list?
Sure. I don't have it in front of me, so I'm trying to remember here. I think that I definitely wanted to have a shared experience of being able to engage in an easy conversation together, to be kind of open about all manner of things without kind of holding back with each other. I really wanted to have an environment in a relationship where we could both do that for each other. I also wanted to share an experience where we could explore various sexual experiences without any shame, where we could be open. Each of us could be open
Mm.
in our more intimate experiences without
That's a
holding back.
good one. That's a good one
That's
to
a
have
very
on your
good one.
list. I'll put
Yes.
that. Well, actually, I found a wonderful guy. I don't need a list. But if I was single, I would be putting that on my list.
Yeah.
But that's very smart. You see, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, because definitely exploring sexual expression is a very important part of the relationship, and you don't want to feel shame or guilt or anything weird about it. You want to be able to ask, can you explore that? I mean, maybe it's too much for the partner, and that's okay. But if you feel you can't ask, it's almost like you're already missing out on so much because you
Right.
might not even like it anyway. But at least you want to try.
Right, right, right. And and for me, I've had mostly relationships with women, but I've also had some with men, and now I'm kind of exploring both experiences. Like, why not? But people have judgments about that on both ends, and I just kind of want to be really authentic in a relationship. Like, I've been told, oh, well, if you date a man, don't ever tell him you've dated women, and I think that is, I could never do that. You know,
Well,
I
that's a
have
lot
to
of
kind of,
judgment to take on board. I mean, that's other
it
people's
really
stuff,
is.
not your stuff. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of the reaction you get is probably more on a fear based because, people are very strange when it comes to this. And they'd, even though they know you as a person, they would
Hmm.
always be, not no some not no that that's not right, not that they would always be, but some people who are insecure within themselves and their own sexuality would have a fear that you would maybe parley with the another sex person and they couldn't compete because it's
Right.
their own issues, their own low self-esteem, their own sense of inadequacy that's coming out. Nothing to do with you at all. But it's kind of put on you so that you feel that pressure, even though you were just trying to be honest
Right.
and not hide your past or what's been going on for you. And that's a tough one because
Mhm.
at the end of the day, that kind of attitude that you encounter with people is very difficult to change. Uh, and it almost encourages you to shut down on being honest about that part of yourself. But what I'd say is, you know what, if it makes them uncomfortable, tough luck. They can suck
Yeah,
it, you know?
I'm with you, Kathy. I mean, I've joked with my friends about one good thing about a first date is there doesn't have to be a second one.
Mm.
You can have a first date, but you're under no obligation to have a second date.
Yeah,
So, um,
that's true.
so I,
You could just not pick up the phone. Eventually, I'll
well,
get it.
no, I've been honest too with people in that regard. Just I just don't think I want to pursue a romantic, relationship with you. But thank you. I enjoyed myself. You know,
Mm.
and just kind of
Yes, try and leave it on a positive note so the person still feel positive about it no matter what.
yeah, because
I mean, that's
there's nothing wrong with them. They just you can tell when it's not a match. It doesn't
yes.
have to a
Yeah.
negative. It's just I don't
Yeah,
want
you
to feel
bring up a good point. It's
on
always
the other
good to try and
person.
end it on a positive note.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so
I know
something
what
I
the trauma feels like, so I don't want to insult that. I mean,
so something I'd like to add in is when people are trying to explore sensuality and sexuality is where some of the oldest traumas people have.
yeah.
Here's an example. One lover goes to another and they put a hand on him, and in a moment that they weren't expecting, there's a flinch response. Have either of you experienced that?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I've experienced that.
Okay.
It's hard not to take that personally.
It's hard not to take that personally. Okay. Or other examples where you're going to go to try to push the lovemaking experience just a little bit to get the intensity of the expression. And all of a sudden there's a shutdown or
Mm-hmm.
crying. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That is a trauma. And that is where individuals in sensual and sexual relationships have to understand the boundaries of the trauma. And if the sexual relationship is truly limited by those traumas, it's going to be up to the individual with the trauma to look at those traumas, to understand why they're blocking out the person that they love. Many people who have forms of verbal abuse or sexual, physical or sexual abuse when they're young encounter this stuff. Believe it or not, more of the verbal abuse people will have that flinch response or won't allow themselves to go into a high volume expression of their own orgasmic energy because too much of their previous expression of high volume was arguing and debating and fighting.
Yeah, yeah. And I think one of the things that if you're the one that is, let's say, doing the touching and get that reaction, it's important for you to remember that often it's not about you personally. It's hard to conceive at the time because it feels like it's only happening to you. But if you can acknowledge to yourself it's not about you, it's about something that they have going on, it's much easier to deal with. And it's also, I guess, in a way, you're respecting who they are and what they have become and the possibility of where you can go with it.
Exactly. The possibility of where you can go. And this is where the fine line between enabling and allowing a person's journey to go on. You have to make that internal choice. Is this somebody I'm taking on as a project? Are they really going to be able to do their own work? Or is it going to be me suggesting X, X, and X for the next 5 years until they do something? And many people find this choice in relationship very early and tacitly consent, agree to it. On a subtle layer, they just let it happen and let it happen and let it happen, hoping that the person will take up and change. But after a while, that hope becomes toxic. and flinch moment after flinch moment, or broken sensual moment after broken sexual moment, where you are trying to get the next level of intimacy, where these broken chains keep breeding down the person that's trying to co-create with the other who's not fully co-creating.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And it's a very difficult one because if this happens early on in a relationship, you have to make that big decision as to whether or not you're going to invest in this or not. Because essentially people don't change, but they can evolve. So whether or not you can decide for yourself whether you think this person is capable of evolving is a big question, because once you've invested time in it and there is no change, then are you going to be comfortable with this?
Exactly, comfortable with this, because you don't know what change on the other side looks like for that person.
Hmm. Yes,
They
or
may
if
be so
indeed they'll be ready this lifetime to do that.
exactly. So now I want to go into a little bit more of how our early relationships, our early sexual expressions and sensual expressions colored the being that we are today.
Oh, that sounds very
Okay?
heavy.
Yeah, it is, because so much of what we do is based on our previous experiences. And one
Yes.
person's experience level isn't equivalent to the other person's experience level,
Yes.
especially when it comes to just loving, not love making itself, the loving side. You may have one person that's been in several relationships or in a dozen relationships, but never truly knows what love is.
That's so true. And they think, well, you make assumptions because they have been in relationships when really your definition of love and their definition are different because of your frame of reference has never been the same. I mean, one of the typical examples I've found is the trust issue. If you start dating someone who has trust issues, and usually this is because, they've been in a relationship where trust has been broken
Hmm.
because of most common thing I've come across is that the partner has stepped out with someone else, whether it's a short term or one night or a long term thing. It's that breaking of trust that is very, very difficult to repair. And indeed, some people can never regain trust within any future relationships. And that is one of the hardest ones to tackle because when you start a relationship with someone who's, let's call it, a little bit broken in that area, it's very difficult because a lot of the attitudes you get and the wariness that you're getting is inherited from someone else. And no matter what you do, it's very difficult to prove to someone that you're worthy of trust. And it's a daunting process, but also very tiring because you're always feeling like you're coming in second place through no fault of your own.
Exactly. Second place and no fault of your own.
Yeah, and that's a really tough one to handle. And for me, one of the things that I've always done, in fact, my brother gave me this great advice, is one of the biggest things that you can do to help people foster trust is give them the code to your phone or your email. And they can willy-nilly look whatever they want, but they're not allowed to comment on how you talk to someone. You've got nothing to hide, but they're not allowed to judge you on how you talk to other people. And if you can both accept that, then you can definitely move ahead. But it's hard to be able to give someone that prying ability, we'll call it, because no
Mhm.
matter what, you feel like you're a bit invaded. But with people with trust issues, they need that. And as long as they can keep their opinions to themselves, that formula will work.
Oftentimes in relationships, when there is some form of broken trust or bent trust, it leads into some form of paranoia or possessive concepts. Both you and I experience this in our privates all the time, where one is being possessive of the other and has no real idea that they're projecting their possessiveness on that person because they want them to heal, they want them to do this, they want them to do that, and the other person is wholeheartedly rejecting all of their change because they're trying to possess and change every action of them.
Yes, that is a big issue. I mean, where does one have their own sovereign being and you have the right to everything that you are and your own boundaries? And where does that start to merge with someone else? That's all part of the relationship
Right.
scenario, isn't it?
Even if what the the person is doing is for your best interest, you are the one that has to make it the choice, not them.
Mm.
That is something both you and I say to everyone that comes for any type of advice or wisdom or healing, that you are the one that has to want to do it. If your partner or mate doesn't want to do it, you cannot make them. You are violating their individual journey if you do.
Yeah, that's so true. You can't compel people to do what you want. I mean, you can, but it won't end well.
It will backfire every
Oh,
time.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. It'll create unworthy expectations. And all of a sudden, you're judging. And then judging creates more levels of paranoia where the mind will create scenarios that never existed in the first place.
Mm, that is so true. So much of it is about accepting people the way they are and being comfortable with the fact that this is it. If they don't change at all, are you going to be happy with this scenario?
Right.
Because if you can't be, then you really have to evaluate whether you're going to move forward with it. I mean, people are capable of evolving, changing that little bit for the evolving, but essentially they're going to be the same person that you met.
Unless they take their own personal journey seriously that has self healing and self nurturing at the foundation.
Yes, yes.
That's it. That's not a lot to ask for when you're trying to grow a relationship, that they have enough strength to heal themselves by going internal, taking a day off, reading a book, and allowing the other partner to be their partner just in their presence, but not having to necessarily pry all the time.
Yeah. It's that balance, isn't it?
Yeah, that balance. Sometimes we do have to surrender to the moment where it's not about our question. It's not about what's happened in the past. It's about going forward in the future, surrendering your expectations, surrendering your limitations, and surrendering yourself to love that got you to there in that first place.
Hmm. That's so true. And a lot will depend on your preconceived ideas of what this is going to look like. Because when it does approach you and you're faced with it, it's about can you embrace it or not? Because, often people have this idea of a perfect person, and that idea is just unrealistic.
Yep.
It's your own concepts of preconceived concepts of what you've made up in your head, and that those people tend to not exist.
Right.
It's about looking eyes open at what's in front of you and seeing the person for who they are and what their feeling is for you and deciding whether or not you're going to move forward with it. Even if it came in a way that you didn't expect, it doesn't mean that it's not good. It could even be better. It's just not your preconceived idea of what was going to happen. That's all.
Exactly. When you realize you have preconceived ideas, you must look at the very nature of why you preconceived them and what those boundaries of those preconceptions are. So you can expand them and push the envelope and saying, all right, I'm not falling to this limitation, this preconceived notion. I'm going to let this person show me through their actions. Okay?
Mm,
Actions oftentimes speak louder than words.
so true. It is
Okay?
so true.
One step forward for one person may be equivalent to 1,000 steps forward to another person.
Mm,
And it took a lot of energy for that one step forward. And if you're in a relationship where you're taking your 50 steps forward and they're taking one step forward, you have to look at your process. Why am I always out competing?
mm,
Okay. Am I trying to be the German shepherd dog, herding them into higher frequency all the time, forcing evolution on them? When I could
mm,
be putting that excess energy to myself and allowing self healing and nurturing to take me to higher frequency, to higher forms of creation, knowing full well that person is on the same journey and is taking the scenic route with their one step at a time, but they're still there for you to fall back and love when you have your own issues or scenarios that arise.
mm. Yeah, that's so true. And also recognizing the courage that it's taken the person to even take that one step.
Exactly. Recognizing that courage, that what that one step really means.
Because for some people, that one step is just so scary and so hard that, I mean, with your own ideas of what is going on in your own life and the way that you can move forward. is not necessarily the same for another. So even to take one step is just, unheard of for them. And recognizing the courage it took and honoring them to have got that place, even if you still want them to go another 100 steps, they might not get 100 steps, but the fact that they took one step to help foster this love relationship means everything. The
Exactly.
action.
Actions speak louder than words.
Yeah.
So the next thing is sometimes we run into relationships that are so out of whack that the only way out is out, but without creating drama, without burning bridges. So many people that you and I get calls from, they're on that edge of walking away, whether it's because business or relationships or kids or whatever it was that created this intense rivalry or opposition where the arguments go to the highest levels, and they're starting to use personal informations to attack you in your conversations and arguments.
Oh, yeah. They know all the buttons.
They know all the buttons.
Yeah, especially family type relationships.
Yep.
And usually, when you're in a love relationship and you let them meet your family, the family has told them a few gems of, secrets that you don't
Baby
want anyone to
stories,
know.
exactly.
Yes. And they'll bring this up and press your buttons. You're like, what? How did you even know that was a button? But it's difficult because when you open yourself up to someone, you do open yourself up to that as well. This is one of the big reasons why people are very hesitant to go deeper into love relationships is because the fear of getting hurt, right? And
Yep.
once you do make yourself vulnerable through love, it is always a possibility. But at the same time, if you don't take that jump and be vulnerable in a love relationship, you can't fully ever enjoy it because you don't have the highs. I mean, of course, every relationship in any scenario has highs and lows, but within an intimate love relationship, the highs are just so fabulous that they're worth a few knocks.
You're right. They're so worth the few knocks. That may be a good teacher to you to not use the crowbar, or when to use the crowbar, or I gotta take, maybe they need a massage, a foot massage instead.
Yeah. I'll go the back route.
Exactly. Go to the back route. Go to the ancient roots of wisdom, foot massage.
That is such a good technique. It almost works every time.
Almost, exactly.
I mean, there'll be some situations it doesn't work for, but I would say 80% you would definitely achieve where you want to go.
Exactly. So now I want to talk about some of the spiritual implications when you have companions and lovers and people in heavy relationships that are constantly fighting. So on an unseen level, you can have two lovers that are arguing. One wants to go in one direction in life, and the other says no, you should go in the other. Like college is a good example for that. And you have people that saying go this way, no, you want to go this way, and you start debating and arguing until there's a shouting exchange. And then oftentimes people on their own time, in their own minds, begin debating and arguing in their mind what they're going to tell the next person the next time they see him. And oftentimes they never do. But this process of debating and arguing in the mind goes on for days at a time. That is called psychic projection. And lovers share it at a most intimate level when the other is doing it, and in your own unknowingness are doing harm to that person, are bringing that argument field into them and triggering their unseen world to have arguments with your unseen world.
That's so true. On top of everything, it's exhausting.
Yes.
The constant playing in your head, or not only the playing, the replaying, then the possible scenarios, and the energy that you're putting out, just even contemplating all this, it can sometimes be so toxic that you don't even realize. And it's not even necessarily toxic to the other person, it's toxic to yourself because you're giving it too much energy in this.
And then they go to have a sexual relation that's a slam bam, thank you, ma'am, and nothing is resolved with no intimacy that compounds that inner argument. And then that turns into a form of subtle psychic attack.
Hmm. That is so true. I mean, another version of this also is the withholding of sexual stuff. It's almost like a blackmail of sorts. You know, until I get what I want, you're not getting any. And
Exactly.
that's,
You're not getting any.
yeah, and that's a very dangerous power play to have in a relationship because you're breaking all sorts of trust with playing that kind of strange game. But I see it a lot in people, and it's very hurtful for both parties, not just the one that is being done to or not done to, as it may be. um, because on top of everything, you are using a bargaining tool that is an intimate um, place with you and your partner. It should not be on the bargaining table to start with. It's one thing to say, you know, I'm just, not feeling it. But it's another thing completely to say, you're not getting it because of blah, 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 blah. You know,
Right.
that's plain out manipulation. And whether you love the person or not, playing with them like that on a mental and an emotional level is really dirty play.
Dirty play that leads into the victim tyrant process. You're the
Yes.
tyrant, but you believe you're the victim.
Yes. The ironies of it all.
Exactly. And oftentimes, both members of the relations are the victims and the tyrants simultaneously, each going, saying, my process is way worse than yours. Pity me. Love me
Yes.
more. But ultimately, that is an ego based love that's saying neither are ready to heal because they're not ready to be intimate enough to talk about their individual expressions and not use sex as the way to resolve something with no words.
Mm,
Oftentimes, it needs the words before the sex.
mm. I think also it's part of reverting back to childhood behavior. It's almost like I'm going to take the toy away.
Yeah, I'm going to take the toy, literally take the toy away.
Yeah, you're not playing the game the way I wanted to play it, so no more toy for you.
Mhm. And when people start doing that as a regular process, it is no longer a relationship in equal co creation. That is a relation of domination,
Mm,
where
yes.
each is trying to dominate the other. And that is a classic example of what spiritual contract revocations can do for people who are in relationships who find themselves in this symbology of the victim, tyrant, tyrant, victim over and over again. You can break the field of energy, bring sacredness to your moment so you can have full heart based exchange available there. Even if the other is still projecting, you can begin to eliminate some of the toxic energy that was generated between the two of you in unawareness.
Mm, yes, and at the same time, think about creating something more positive and beautiful that works for both of you.
Right.
Come out of that place of love that you both have. Step out of that yucko energy that you're in with all the control, the compelling your will, etc. on people. Recognize yourselves as both being wonderful, sovereign individual beings worthy of a beautiful, loving relationship and discovering how to both move forward into getting into that place. Even if it's as simple as going back to one of our original things, agree to disagree and move on.
In
And
respect. In respect.
yes,
Because
yes,
too many people agree to disagree in disrespect.
that is true. That is very true.
Okay. And that's judgment at the most subtle layers. All right. So the next thing I want to talk, we got about 10 minutes left in the show, maybe 8 minutes here, is when relationships are done and over with and divorce is on the table and the fighting has grown to so much that it's overwhelming to you, the children, the family members, etc., etc. What to do then? How to get peace in oneself so once again they can step up to the table of dating and find the right person that is for there for them.
Yeah, it's such a difficult place to be in when a relationship has hit that point, and finding something positive to move forward to is often very, very difficult because you're so immersed in the situation and the things that have been going on. And especially if you have kids, It's very difficult because you're being pulled in all sorts of directions. You're trying to be fair to them by not saying too much, but at the same time, you're so enraged over certain things that it's very difficult to come and talk out of a place of love, a place of positive, and to look forward to try and create something that is calm and peaceful and positive, whatever that may look like for you. And being able to sit back. I mean, of course, number one thing, always go back to the grounding, get your own grounding done, and then look for your variables that are coming up. Like, what do you think the future looks like for you? Where is it that you want to go? How is it that you want to have this relationship with a person later? Because even if there was no children involved and you just plan on having a quick divorce, this person's energy is always going to be in your space to
That's
some
right.
degree, whether it's because of their family and the friendships you've made with them, or you share common friends, or, often with divorce, it's never so simple. There's like a decade of stuff that still goes on,
A
your
dog,
stuff, his stuff.
a
Yes.
dog and a cat,
Yeah. Custody, your
living
pet.
things you can't break up. It's not just a bed set.
Yeah. So it's how do you want that future to look for yourself with this person? Because just because you can't exist together anymore in a
As your dog even
uh,
speaks up.
yes. First you sit the dog on them. um, but how do you want this to look for you in 10 years time? How do you want to be able to set an example for any future kids that you may have or that you may end up acquiring through another relationship? What examples are you going to set for them if you just end this in an ugly tone and can't fix this over to have some
Exactly.
positive future?
So when it comes to that high level, I mean, you and I get the divorce concepts all the time where they're trying to separate themselves. And oftentimes they're trying to sleep for themselves for the first time. They're trying to go through everything that's that separation, plus the blankness that no longer has that love there, that's been replaced by the victim tyrant and the arguments over and over again. This is where you must once again revert to grounding, self healing, self nurturing, putting yourself back on your own individual path, looking at the victories you've created in your own life, even if it was with that former partner, so that new victories can be created with new partners, new companions.
That is a really good way to look at it because no matter how this relationship ended, there must have been beautiful moments within it.
Right. And you cannot sully the previous moments.
Yes.
Even if the other person is trying to make them toxic, the more you understand those good moments were yours in those moments. And yes,
Yeah.
they may bring some form of sadness, but they're still your victory that got you to where you are now. And yes, pain, the love, when you break up, love hurts. It really does. But it doesn't need to hurt so much. Oftentimes, people victimize themselves too much when a love is broken.
Yeah, that is true. It's amazing how that can happen actually because you can go from being your normal everyday self, which is you would consider quite sane and emotionally balanced, to suddenly become what you perceive as such a terrible things that happened to you and made you a victim, and how will you ever recover? And you've gone from 0 to 100 in like a millisecond,
Mm-hmm.
and had to get yourself out of that rut without wallowing in it because it's pretty easy to wallow in it.
Right. Without becoming an introvert and a hermit
Mm,
or a
yes.
hermetic introvert. You know, oftentimes people in dating, they go through 5, 6 months where they disappear from their friends. Why? Because they're feeling unworthy.
Yes, definitely. That their sense of self-esteem is gone, um, and they often one part of it which surprised me when I finally realized it was that they don't want other people to see them weak, like crying,
Right.
because of the judgment that would come with it.
Right.
Because even though your mind tells you that this was the correct thing to happen, your heart can't necessarily agree with it at that moment yet. So when you are weeping uncontrollably in front of people, often a lot of people will consider that as a terrible sign of weakness and don't
Right.
want people to see them in that
Or
dark moment.
they'll subtly judge you as a drama person when in fact
Yes.
you did need that attention, not to create drama, because you were truly in need at that moment.
Mm, that's right. You needed someone to hear you, someone maybe even to hug you, just not to be on your own.
Right.
To
Just for that moment, just to share space in that common moment of understanding, yes, this person's going through a hard time. And I can sit there in silence and still love this person enough so that they can go through their emotional moment.
mm, mm, yeah. It's a tough thing to do, especially as a friend when you see it happening. It's very difficult not to um, say things with judgment, and it's not necessarily judgment of your friend. It's more judgment on what the friend's partner have done to them or their version of what's happened. Because
Right.
often when people tell you this story, you really just need to listen, not comment, because by commenting, you're opening dialogue about an issue that is really done.
Right. Done. Alrighty, that is our music, Kathy. This was our first big bag dating